سلام دوستان، به پادکست زمین خوش اومدین. مهمون امروز من شری زوهار گادس آی، این اسمشون به زبان انگلیسیه، شری قدسی هستن. ایشون یک معلم، نویسنده، شاعر و مادر هستن. شور و اشتیاق شری در این هستش که به دیگران کمک کنند که یک فرهنگ ضد استبداد و استعمار و قدرت حاکم رو به وجود بیارن. فرهنگی که به سایکدلیک ها با نگاه مثبت دیده میشه. فرهنگ و دنیایی که از سایکدلیک ها استفاده میشه که آدما توانمند بشن و حقیقت درونی خودشون رو دریابن و کمک کنند که دنیای عادلانه‌ای برای همه درست بشه. شری بنیانگذار روش‌های جدید در زمینه ادغام و یک پارچه سازی تجارب سایکدلیک هستند. ایشون تا امروز 5 مؤسسه کاهش آسیب در رابطه با استفاده از سایکدلیک ها تأسیس کردند. شری برنامه‌های آموزشی متعددی رو ابداع کردن برای آموزش رواندرمانی به کمک سایکدلیک و مدیریت خلاق. ایشون یک پروتکل برای یک پارچه سازی به وجود آوردن به نام متد The Psyched Soul. شری برای درست کردن روش‌هاشون خرد و آگاهی، کیهانشناسی، روانشناسی فراشخصی، درمان کوانتومی، فلسفه شرقی، خرد باستانی رو با سبک‌های امروزی ترکیب می‌کنن. وبسایت شری هستش www.thepsychedsoul.com که من در قسمت توضیحات پادکست میذارم. Sheri, your bio in English was so articulate and poetic. I hope my Farsi translation did justice. I have been going over your website for the past few days, reading your blog, reading about the programs that you've created, the courses, your worldview, philosophy, and the work that you have done to make this world a better place. And I am sincerely in awe. It is such an honor having you here. Thank you so much for accepting my invitation to be my guest.
Thank you so much for having me. You know, to hear you speaking about my work in Farsi, which is my lineage's native tongue, is very emotional for me. I couldn't understand a single word. I could only guess what it said because I wrote the bio, but I don't speak Farsi. Yet the dialect and the intonation and the emotion behind it definitely resonates in my body. So thank you. And I already see that we're both starting to cry, so let's just go for it.
We can cry here as much as I have cried during the podcast episodes. And I have to say, when I was translating your bio, I was getting emotional. So maybe that was transferred somehow, because as I said, I can tell that it's come from your heart, and I connected and I related and it resonated with me. So, today, our topic is the notion of awakening. So I would like to start by asking you this question. How do you define awakening? What does it mean?
Thank you. The way that I see awakening and feel it and attempt to be in dialogue with that concept is being aware to the total sum of the multidimensionality of who we are as spiritual beings in a human body on all multiple levels and dimensions, the psychic world, the physical world, the cognitive world, the psychology, the spirituality, and our connection with what we call in psychology the transpersonal, what it is that's beyond the self. So awareness of not just the multidimensionality and beautiful richness of who we are, but that everything else around us, the environment that we exist in, the reality that we exist in, and have co-created with all the other multidimensional points of reference of all the humans on planet Earth. So the awareness of that as well. So for me, being aware of ourselves and everyone else in our environment and our relations, to me, that's awakening. I don't, I think that right now this podcast is so timely because we are obviously at a time on planet Earth that so many of us are becoming more aware of the injustice, the grave injustices that are happening in our world, all the ways that freedom is stripped away from us. How have we contributed to the world being in the shape that it is, and what can we do to also change it? And of course, we know that at this time of recording of the podcast, we have in Iran, hopefully history will tell of this time as one of the greatest revolutions that ever took place on planet Earth, as people are fighting for their freedom to exist. And I think that is such a beautiful representation of people awakening and becoming awake to live a holy, sovereign, rich, and free life.
Wow. Beautifully said. Thank you. Thank you. It is. Yeah. How timely it is. It's amazing. I feel like the whole reason that I started my podcast last year, way before all this revolution happened, was for me to reach this point in time. I don't know why it happened, how it happened, but now every time I have a conversation with one of my guests, it comes that apparently like we have been preparing ourselves for this moment of time as Iranians collectively. So my next question is how and when awakening could happen to some of us, may happen to some of us.
Thank you. So I'm going to start with, I think what a lot of people may resonate with is that, again, as going back to right now on planet Earth, there is a big awakening. I feel like the era of the pandemic is definitely one that has, again, because our freedom was taken away from us, or at least many people felt that way, with the lockdowns and the vaccine mandates that, some people were for, some people were against. But I think that era as a period in history, because of all the restrictions and because of the how rapidly and literally our lives on a global level changed overnight. It just flipped upside down. One moment we could go get toilet paper, and the next moment we couldn't.
Isn't that something what we experienced, the entire universe? Yes.
Yeah. So it just made us question, I think, okay, I mean, I think we were in such deep slumber and kind of getting complacent about, the comforts of modern living, until, again, the most basic rights were taken away from us. To go outside and be in the park, that was taken away from us. So it really, I think, made a lot of people begin question their life, question the reality, question the government, question the way that they operate in the world. Obviously that period, because of the lockdowns, because of the isolation, and of course the many different stressors, like the financial stressors that many people went through, not being able to work, being fired, not being able to sustain themselves, have really brought about, or not brought about, rather have caused people to suffer mentally, and many ill mental health patterns that were in their systems just erupted. So a lot of people got depressed, they developed anxiety, they developed all sorts of different symptoms, panic attacks, obviously fear, because there was no certainty about the future. And in those states, again, when we tend to be so deep in our psychological process, there is a lot of self-investigation that happens. So So again, a world event such as the pandemic or any time of crisis that happens, again, maybe not globally, even just personally, when there is a loss or death in the family, God forbid, or a separation, divorce, loss of a job, and so forth. Typically in a time of crisis, there is also an opportunity and for people to awaken and make change, because they realize, once you're scraping the bottom of the barrel, you're not happy, you're angry, you maybe have no resources. There's really nothing left except for you and your mind. And then when we realize that our mind is not necessarily a safe place to be, that's when we go deeper and find our soul. So times of crisis is another one. And also generally, if we look like at the span of a human life, then the era that is between age 35 to 45, 50-ish, not to say that it can happen before or after, but generally it's around that midlife, which, pop culture termed it as a midlife crisis, when people begin to question everything and they realize that they're not happy and they want to live a more authentic life, because they realize that, time is going by so quickly. Better, do something about it and wake up, right? Wake up. So typically in midlife as well, that is also a time when a lot of people begin looking within to find their soul, who they are, why they're here, and what life they want to live.
That is such an interesting point that I never paid attention to. Okay, I had heard about midlife crisis and everything. I never connected the two that, well, obviously I'm in that age range. But I see how my friends who are about my age are changing. And I was wondering why. Actually, recently I was in New York and I was talking to I was with and talking with a childhood friend. We've known each other since I'd say grade 8. So it's been a long time. And she told me something. She said, Lola, I had never known you. I feel like I know you so well, but I had never known you the way you are until just a few years ago. Have you changed, or am I seeing a different, like you on a deeper level? And I'm like, what are you talking about? That's what I was going to tell you. You are the person that I've known. Have you changed? Are you going through something? So we had that conversation. And now that I'm thinking, I've had similar conversations with a lot of my friends who are about my age. And now that you're pointing that our age could have something to do with what we're going through, that makes a lot of sense to me.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. And I mean, without spending too much time on this, there are many explanations as to why. I mean, even when we think on a social level, typically the period, 20s, we're busy like building a family, creating work, creating our career, raising children. And then around, again, midlife, when the children are older, we have more time. There is definitely a shift also in the season of a person's life. So when the kids are about to leave the home, going to college. So people are, again, looking for, okay, if my nest is now empty, what is left? What is left for me to do? What do I like to do? They're trying to fill up their time. And that's when, again, they go into, there's an opportunity for rediscovery of who they are and the truth that they want to live. Yeah.
Thank you. So you talked about when awakening could happen. Are there ways that we can, like tools that we can use to make it happen too? Or we have to be just put in a certain position without our own will? Or is there anything that we can do besides our surrounding, our environment, things that are happening to us?
100%. There are numerous and countless tools that have been developed and practiced for thousands of years. For example, meditation, right, is one of them. But before we talk about any tools, I think there is also room to talk about, well, Who is the person that is ready to awaken? All right. And actually, let me rephrase that. Let me reframe that, because to awaken, is not in everyone's dharma. It's not in everyone's life path to live a certain life and then to get to a point where they wake up or create big changes and then they live the rest of their lives as an awakened person. It's not necessarily like that. Some people it's on their life's path to get into that place, and some people may never happen in this lifetime, and that's okay. So let's first distinguish that. And secondly, the prerequisite for awakening, okay, is a desire to change. A desire to change. Meaning awakening doesn't just come and tap on your shoulder and say, okay, it's time for you to get up. If you are a person that is resistant to moving along with the times, that is not open to hearing other people's opinions, that tends to blame all of their issues on other people, and they're not ready to have a conversation with themselves and assume responsibility for their lives. And these types of people, and of course, most of us go through this path, right? We were raised to parents and families that carry a lot of trauma because of the life that they lived. A lot of our parents, I was born in Israel to Iranian immigrants. They immigrated from Iran to Israel. Then we migrated to the United States. And then recently we all migrated again. My parents went back to Israel and I immigrated to Costa Rica. So, all these life changes, they cause a lot of stress on the family lineage, and a lot of trauma is in our family lineage, not ours, everyone's. So there is anger, there is shame, there is guilt, there is, issues that you have to deal with as a human. And of course, it's a part of our human story to go through these feelings, but some of us are not ready to step out of that. They choose to remain in that place because, again, this is who they are, that's their dharma, and that's okay. So I think when a person is ready to just say no more to, again, I'm living in lack, I'm angry, I don't have good relationships, I'm always stressed, I'm depressed, it's killing me, I can no longer take this type of life, I need to do something about it. When that statement is made, that means that's a declaration for readiness for change. And then the path to, of course, to healing and improving our lives and improving everything about ourselves, improving our health, our relationships, and awakening, that is the path.
Trauma. I think that's a key word. And you mentioned a trauma, the trauma that is created in us because of immigration. I was in a class that we were talking about intersectionality recently, and they were talking about everything, marginalized people. Nobody said immigrants. Everybody was talking about race and religion, even gender. I think immigration, my family immigrated from Iran to the United States in the 70s, went back to Iran, immigrated again to Canada in the 90s. And then I had to immigrate to the United States in around 2010. Every time I immigrated from one country to the other, I feel that I'm carrying the trauma of that. It's been traumatic for me. And to be honest with you, I never paid attention to that trauma until recently. Thanks for talking about that. I think that's very, very important. So you were going, I don't know if I cut you off. I got
No, I mean, I think immigration is just, and I'm speaking to this specifically because, this is an Iranian Farsi podcast that, of course, has a worldwide audience, and, you're based in the United States, and I'm American as well. So we have a huge audience in the United States. I grew up in Los Angeles, which, is maybe some of the listeners know is also termed Evangelist, okay, because such a large Iranian population that lives in that town. And yeah, I agree. The idea of immigration, you know, our people, we're not, even though we maybe some of us were born there, some of us were raised there, have the citizenship assimilated in that town. Really, like a lot of there's communities that do very well, and yet it's its own very distinct culture. It has a very specific characteristics. Some of these characteristics I feel have obviously it's a cultural, but they've flourished in Los Angeles and kind of and contributed to the town, while other ones maybe not so much, right? Because at the end of the day, the community is pretty closed off. It does have its own set codes of moral standards and ethics. There is definitely hierarchy in terms of socioeconomic standards. There are still things about the culture that I feel were translated from Iran to the United States that I think people in the younger generations, like my generation, for example, my children's generations, they're still healing from that, and I think we're a little bit different because we, obviously we're at a different generation. We have more of a voice. We learned about trauma in school. We have the language to talk about it, but there are a lot of issues that are, frankly, not discussed in the community. No matter how evolved and sophisticated, again, like in the Iranians in Los Angeles are extremely sophisticated, like
Yes.
well-traveled, well-educated, and still, you can take a person out of Iran. You could never take Iran out of a person or any culture, really.
I agree with you. So speaking of awakening and the characteristics of a specific culture that we were talking about, do you think resistance to change is a part of our culture?
100%.
Okay.
And I also want to share that, again, I consider myself, to those of us who are listening, I was invited to speak on a Farsi speaking podcast, but I am Israeli. I'm not, my parents were born in Iran. We didn't grow up with the language in our home as children. We were Israelis. And when we moved to Los Angeles, it was very interesting because that is actually for the first time in my life, as when we became Iranians, because when we moved to Los Angeles, we didn't assimilate with the Israeli community, we assimilated with the Iranian community.
How interesting.
So, isn't it? Yeah. And so, so my lens, and the stories that I have, obviously they're very subjective. So I just want the listeners to also keep that in mind. And of course, people who are listening, their experience may be very different. But I do think, so being an Israeli that got assimilated in an Iranian community, because there was a language barrier, because myself, I did not understand the culture. I didn't. I wasn't aware of many of the customs or, the different holidays like Nowruz. They weren't celebrated in our home. Whereas again, the Iranian community in Los Angeles, again, is very sophisticated and very much rooted in their culture. And I did find that, again, me personally, that it was kind of like a black sheep, in that community. And I felt it very strongly throughout high school. I went to Beverly Hills High, which is like majorly Iranian.
Yes.
And like, I know that we're not doing a video with this podcast, but like, if you saw me right now, I have like braids in my hair. I have like nose ring, septum ring. I have like a very alternative look, which I love.
Yes, me too. It suits you so well.
Thank you. And this feels like it's me. And yet, when I was growing up, this wasn't a thing that was really accepted in this culture, right? It was very different. It was very novel. It was very daring and bold. And so I felt, like I didn't really feel a sense of belonging. And And, you know, I do think that it's also very like individual and personal. I think every family can be, you know, very different. I think, you know, like in the case of our friend Jahan, who was, I guess, on your show just a couple of shows ago, you know, he came on the show, or his dad was on the show, and they talked about how the father, they experienced psychedelic journeys together,
I
which
know.
is amazing, you know. So I do think that it really, like, it's really and person dependent, the readiness for change, again, what is on their soul's dharma, their soul's code. And with that, I do think my observation is that because culturally speaking, it seems to be very set in its traditions. I believe that there are many people who are ready for change and yearn for that change and ready to wake up, but they don't do it, or they're terrified to do it because of the cultural implications and being the fear of being reprimanded. And again, if we look at what's happening in Iran right now, this is the epitome. This is exactly the representation of this. You know, people are ready to change, but culturally, the government will not allow it and will issue them the death sentence. Like literally, what is worth? They just announced, I don't know how many thousands of people just were given the death sentence for speaking up.
Basically.
Right. So when a culture is so deeply conditioned, then there's going to be fear, even if that seed is in there. There is going to be fear of speaking about it, of voicing it, of exploring it, because what will people say? Am I going to be shunned from my community? Is my family going to disown me? Basically means that, you know, it's a type of death.
Yeah. Tell me about your personal experience. You did that in a Middle Eastern family. If you want to share, if you're open,
and I did not die, as you can see. I'm still
yes. There we go.
still here. I'm still, you know, survive. Not more, way more than surviving. I'm thriving. Thank God. I'm in the best place that I've been in my life. So again, I think there is a really great a quote that one of my mentors once shared with me. He's a clinical psychologist. He said, he looked at me one day, I told him about my story. He said, listen, in every family, there is that one person that's there to wake up and awaken everybody else. In every family, there is that one person that is that, you know, they're usually termed as the troublemaker, the rebel, the, you know, the problematic, the problem child, the person that doesn't fit in. You know, there are, again, many psychology theories around this, specifically in family systems and the roles that people have in the family. But so my mentor said, in every person there, in every family, there is one. So in my family, I was the one.
Okay.
And you know, I was always, from childhood, I was always a seeker. I was always very curious about psychology, you know, just for the sake of, you know, as a child, I was trauma informed. I remember being traumatized by an event when we were little kids. Someone broke into our home and I was literally traumatized by it. And I went to my parents and said, I need to go see a psychologist because I'm traumatized. And I think I was like 7 or 8 years old.
Wow. How wise.
Yeah. Yeah. And the cultural conditioning, right, was, what are you talking about? Only crazy people go to psychologists, you know, you're not crazy, everything's okay. And this is, again, the cultural narrative. So from a very young age, you know, there was, I was, again, a seeker, a questioner, and, you know, very like knew who I was. And growing up in again, a lineage that is so, to me, again, this is how I see it, restrictive. You know, I'm Israeli, I have that sass, and the Iranian culture, I feel, is more, again, set in its way, is aligned with a certain look, is aligned with, you know, the traditions, the tarof, you know, the
Tarof. Tell me about Tarof.
which I never understood. And, you know, I grew up like a wild child, anyhow, long story short, so that seed was always within me. This wasn't something that just happened overnight. And yeah, grew up. And when finally I was at a place where I was an adult and I could begin to question, I actually chose not to, I chose not to, or not, I don't know if choosing not to was really it, because choosing means that there is a conscious choice. I wasn't conscious at the time. I was just, I think I found kind of a groove in life which felt kind of like I was going with, the community standards. I went to college, got married, like, did all these things. And still couldn't find a place of internal happiness and peace. Everything was turbulent. Even with college, I started, 1 degree industrial design, then something about it didn't feel right. So I left it. Then I went to study education. Then I became a makeup artist. Then, just jumping from profession to profession, from relationship to relationship. But I was doing everything right. This was the thing. And this is the key. That, and when I say that, I mean that a lot of people, when they get to a place of, how is this happening? I'm doing everything right. The world told me to, to go to school, get a job, support yourself, get married, do all these things, and that this is the path to being a good human and finding happiness. And I did all those things, but I wasn't happy. I wasn't peaceful. I wasn't settled. It didn't feel like me. And this is, by the way, I think 99% of my clients articulate exactly that. When they come to me for consultations, they share the exact same story. I'm successful. I have the wife, the kids, blah, 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 blah. And I'm on medication and I don't have time for myself. And I don't think that this is the life I was meant to live. Right. So I was kind of on the same path as well. And I felt, I was always very artistic. So I began, attending, art festivals in the US and really felt at home in that community. Again, very artistic, very creative, visionary people that were very different from the people I knew in, culturally and from my family. So I felt for the first time like I found the people that speak my language. And actually, I wasn't that weird. I wasn't strange at all. It was, there's a lot of people like me, just not, in where I grew up, where I came from. So when I discovered that crowd, I felt like I could finally be myself. And that's when I also discovered psychedelics and plant medicines. Which, that's a whole other story, but basically being with my people, I also discovered the tools, going back to your question about tools, like what tools can help us awaken. The artistic and creative community are generally awakened, conscious people. And they do have all the tools. So I learned about the different tools and modalities and began experimenting. And then I tried psychedelics, and for the first time, I felt like I really had an opportunity to really be in touch with my soul, completely free. Again, for the first time, completely free of all the conditioning, all the stories, all the you're not good enough, all the you're not like us, all the, times I was bullied at school by people who, like, Iranian kids in my high school who spoke Farsi in front of me and like literally bullied me and put me down, thinking that I don't understand their nasty words, but I definitely understood what they were saying. A space for the first time that was completely free of that. And I learned that actually when I was free of all that conditioning, which caused me to be very angry, unsettled, again, not peaceful, violent, out of touch with myself, when all of that was removed from me for the first time in my life, I saw myself and I said, wow, like I'm actually a pretty awesome soul. I'm like an amazing soul, human being. I'm not all of these like ill stories that have been told my entire life. I am actually really good. So So it was a place of like really deep knowing. And then of course, from that place, it took many, many years of ongoing work, including psychedelics, plant medicines, therapy, integration, meditation, yoga, different healing modalities, health coaches, sound journeys, you name it, I've done it. Energy work, of course. And but again, that first glimpse that I had, that opportunity to witness who I really was, if all these stories were removed, that was priceless. But then the work was on me to begin removing and cleaning and clearing and being strong and resolute enough to say no to anything that tried to like come and dilute or dirty my energy field again, because it's not easy when you're ready to make changes, but everyone around you is not.
Yes. And tell me how everyone around you was not ready for your change.
Yeah, and I'm going to speak about this very delicately because I love my family very much. And this is a very personal story. And I think we've all been, each person is on a journey individually, collectively, and, the family, every family has a story and a journey as well. But, so yeah, I was ready and other people were not. And it took me a long time to understand that, as the Buddhists say, we're not responsible for anyone else's suffering. And we're also not responsible for anyone else's awakening. Meaning, if me, from my place, I see that other people, if they only tried this, if they only read this book, if they only went to this workshop, they could live such a good life. They could be so free. They could have so much peace. They won't be depressed anymore, and then try and almost like force, right? The different modalities that have worked for me. If I try to do that on people who are not ready, there's going to be a backlashing, right? So it took me a long time to detach myself from that, okay, if a person, again, is not ready, they're on their path, they need to be at the place where they are. If they choose to be in the suffering, or they choose not to be in, wherever they're at, that's their journey. It's their respective journey. And I have to honor that. The only thing that I can do is embody my own happiness and embody my own freedom, and create invitations to join, to try out, the different things, to have conversations about it, and really just to be a good human being and learn to meet them where they're at. And I think for me, more than anything, that's been like my, the thing that I'm really still working on and, learning to refine, is how can I, from the very long journey that I've made, and I've come so far, I'm a girl from the desert. I literally grew up in a desert and then was transported to the United States, and the places that I've been and seen, like, it's been a long journey. And I can see how that there could be a mismatch now between, the way that I see the world, the way that I speak. We literally don't even speak the same language in some sense. I can't explain to my parents what I do for work because they don't have that context. My dad actually, like, sometimes, like, we try to talk about it. So I try to explain in like words that, can be meaningful. You can meet God. Every person has a soul. These tools can help you find God and find the truth about yourself. And I really try to like deconstruct it and make it very digestible. But it's different. It's a different experience. So I'm really just working on being kind, and like Ram Dass said, just love everyone. Every person, no matter who they are, is really an emanation of God. So just try to love everyone like they're God, and trust that all is well.
You said it so beautifully. And I'm going to translate every word in Farsi. And I hope your parents listen to it and understand what a beautiful person you are and how happy you are, and your journey, you got there. It's been a long journey, as you said, but you said it in the beginning of our conversation that this is the best place you've been in your life. This is where you feel belong, right?
Yes.
You are exactly who you are, inside and out. Wow. There's so much for myself to digest. I mean, it's very emotional for me right now speaking with you. Should we continue or?
Yeah, we have time for sure.
Okay. Thank you so much for sharing your personal story and being so open. And it resonated with me, your story. And I'm sure so many of our listeners, even the ones who are in Iran, this is our story. I don't know if it's the Middle Eastern thing, but I'm sure everybody experiences to a degree what you experienced, not feeling belong. And then finally you found a place that you were happy.
We have to learn, to create the place of belonging for ourselves. When we first belong by feeling at home in our body, when we are deeply and heavily culturally conditioned. And by the way, this is not just the Iranian culture, the Middle Eastern culture, every culture in the world, every religion in the world, there is a conditioning, there are stories, there is a narrative, there is a plot, there is, guidelines and rules. So it's not just our culture, it's every culture, but I'm, speaking obviously because this is our context. And for me, I'm learning that, again, the journey of belonging is first to belong to yourself. When we are so deeply conditioned, we are in a state of self-abandonment. Self-abandonment meaning we have completely forgotten who we are and why we came to this earth and what our role is, what our purpose is in this lifetime. We forgot that we came here as conscious, pure beings of love, literally storyless, pure beings of love and energy and light. And then through the way that we were raised, the media, all the stories, that the systemized oppression that we are all experiencing, whether we think that we do or not, we're all experiencing it, and it's affecting all of us. We're all traumatized in one way or another, because of the state of the world that we live in. It's a traumatized world. We're all suffering from it. And once so we've forgotten the state of our lightness and our being. And the journey is, again, really all about clearing all of that so you can get in touch and first belong with your light. When you belong with your light and you have that conviction that this is who I am, not all these stories that I was spoon-fed my entire life. And especially, all the stories of, again, what I found in the Iranian community specifically, we have so much shame in our community.
Yes.
So much guilt in our community. So much not good enough in our community. A lot of competition. There's a lot of a great sense of separatedness. And it's so funny because, in some ways, it's all about the big family, the tribe, everyone knows everyone's third cousin and everyone's together. And with that, there's all these internal stories, there's gossip, there's it's it almost doesn't feel, in some ways it doesn't feel very authentic, and because people have forgotten that we are not the shame, we are not the guilt. There is no room to talk about what people are truly feeling, so people repress all their feelings further. And that's why I think your podcast is so incredibly important, Lola, because you're literally giving a voice to what millions of people in the world just wish that they had the courage to say. But when, again, there's so again, it doesn't matter. The but doesn't matter. I just think that you're doing such an amazing service. And when people find resonance in voices like yours, like mine, like all the other guests that you've had and beyond, then you realize that we're not that different at all. We're all here. We're so similar. And if anything, we're more similar because we understand the cultural nuances. This is what's so amazing about it. You know, when I go to a white therapist, which by the way, I do have a white therapist and she's
Me
great.
too.
Okay. She's excellent. But there's, you know, she doesn't get it. You know, she doesn't get it. She doesn't get, you can't tell a Middle Eastern person to never speak with her family again. Okay. It doesn't work like that. It's a lot more complicated than that. Right. And so I feel like we need anyone who's listening and who's feeling the tickle to awaken. Okay. If you can hear me out, we need you. Okay. Whatever your superpower is, whatever your call is, even if you're not sure what it is yet, okay, you have a superpower, you have a role. You're not listening to this podcast for just by chance. You're listening to it for a reason. And this is your wake-up call from the higher power to accept that even though the journey has been long and maybe you haven't really felt like you've belonged in your family, in your life, and you're still not fully settled yet, you are important. We need you right now at this time on planet Earth to create this global revolution that our brothers and sisters in Iran are literally putting their lives on the line for. We don't have to, you know, we're obviously in a different place of privilege. We're able to get out on the street and demonstrate and not get killed. You know, in the United States, at least we have that, thank goodness. But you know, you don't even have to go do that. You can serve your role in so many other ways, like Lola, start a podcast, start a club in your area, start a meetup group in your community just for people who want to awaken and maybe don't know how. Start a book club, start connecting with people. And this is how change is created, from the people, by the people. And it just takes one voice, like a match, that's going to light up all the other voices like a box of matches. So we need you. We need you. And Lola's here to support. I'm here to support, of course, so many other guests and professionals that you've had here. We're here to help each other. So
We are. Absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you so much, Cherie. You're so inspiring. I am inspired. And I know that your words are going to inspire so many.
Thank you.
Thank you for all you do, not only for being my guest and giving me your beautiful time, for everything that you do. I'm absolutely grateful to Jahan for introducing us, and it's been really such an honor. Is there anything else you would like to tell anybody who speaks Farsi for me to translate it here for you?
Yeah, well, first of all, you know, I do want to say something. It's been really interesting because a lot of my healing journey, because my entire life I felt like I didn't belong. And I was not just didn't belong, I felt shunned by this culture. Because I've been so with high intention to feel that sense of belonging again, there has been a pull for me to return to work with my people. And literally to a point where just like 2 or 3 weeks before Jahan introduced us, Lola, I swear I wrote in my diary, I said, I am ready to work with my people. I'm ready to meet them. I'm ready to support them. Again, if the white therapist can't do it, that's why we're here. That's why, you know, again, we each have a role. So I'm inspired to, again, offer support to anyone who is listening. Lola mentioned my website, psychedsoul.com. I do have a couple of other websites as well that you can check out. They're listed on the Psyched Soul. I offer multiple courses. I offer private mentoring. I offer private consultations. Everything remains completely confidential if you're nervous about that. And just know that resources are available. All that needs to happen on your end is the declaration and the readiness. Just like I declared 2 weeks before I met Lola that I was ready to connect with my Iranian sisters and brothers. And Source, God, like connected us, which I think is so remarkable. I made the declaration and it happened. So you too can make a declaration in baby steps and just begin following the breadcrumbs. And you are so powerful and so capable of changing your life for the better, no matter what journey you're on. And, you know, some of you may be dealing with with mental health issues, emotional issues, financial issues, relational issues, children, we're all going through the same things in our own way. And just know that we're here to help each other. So don't hesitate to reach out with anything, even just email me and say hi, just so we can get to know each other.
Lovely. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
So I guess we're going to say goodbye here. And I really do hope that you come back. I have so many questions.
Yeah, thank
I
you.
really would love to learn more about your work. And also there was this, I want to say this, in your website, just before we end, I read this part, actually I have it under your passions, and I want to say that in Farsi. شعری دوست داره که بنویسه، که موسیقیای برای بچه ها درست بکنه، اونا رو بنوازه، آواز بخونه، دنیا رو از دید فرزندش ببینه و تغییرات رو ایجاد بکنه، با وجود اینکه ممکنه خیلی سخت باشن. Thank you so much, Shiri.
Thank you so much.
Have a great day. I'll talk to you soon, hopefully. Okay, I'm going to end the recording here.